All right, for today's update, what I'm looking at is I have the transition pan and the trunk pan placed in there. They're not welded in. It's just held up on jack stands and vice grips holding the pan in place. It's kind of like where I left off in, I think, like video like 17 or something. And I've had a little shift in direction of what I want to do. I've been trying to focus on obviously getting rid of any rot, but I also want the finished product to be pretty sturdy, so kind of rigid. So I've leaned towards, or made a move towards, basically incorporating convertible interrocker panels in rails in the build. So so I bought those. I've got two of them. I've got obviously the right and the left. You can see that in the video or not, but so these are big, kind of hat shaped pieces that go end to end. And so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to mark the firewall at the bottom. I mean, this is kind of obviously flexible now, it's not tied to a floor, but I'm going to have to mark this bottom and then notch that out where that piece has to slide in. Now you can't slide it in from the front without taking the tabs off the back end of the rail. So realistically, it's probably got to go into the car and then come forward into position and then slide against, and then maybe have the rail pulled up on the bottom. So as a result of changing my plan a little bit, it's changing what I'm going to be doing back here somewhat. So I don't want to get ahead of myself and weld something in place that I then have to chop off later. So I'm just trying to figure out the smartest way to go about doing it. One of the factors I got to consider is the floor pan. So like I bought a floor pan from Kentucky Mustang this week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and I've got to take it out and look at it and everything. But it's a coupe fastback floor pan that just goes from bottom of the back seat to the back edge of the firewall. So it actually has flanges on it that go against the standard coupe fastback rocker. Those will have to be probably trimmed off on each side, and then the rails will be put in, and it'll probably butt up against the bottom of the rail and be welded along the bottom instead. The only tricky part of that is that the floor pan typically sits on top of the firewall. So it sits on top of the bottom flange of the firewall, and then, if I'm thinking it correctly, and then on the back it's on top of the transition pan. So technically the floor pan would be in there, and these two would fold up underneath it. It's kind of the way it would, how it seemed like with the seams at least. So as a result, I can't just put the rails in and take the floor and orient the bottom and bring it up from the bottom, because it's not going to be right. So, and the other problem is obviously if I go bring it from here, I smack into the rear torque boxes, so it'll be a problem. So I'm going to have to, like I said, trim the flanges off each side of the floor pan, and then basically kind of shimmy it in. Or I saw a guy online who had he had used an engine hoist, Harbor Freight engine hoist or whatever, to tie a strap or something through the gear shift hole on the floor pan, and then to maybe like one of the seatbelt bracket holes or the back, and just holding the weight of it by itself. It's sheet metal, it's pretty lightweight, but it's kind of flimsy. So it naturally wanted to bow a little bit, which was enough to get him his width difference that he could then shift it under and just kind of like bring it under the rail and then scoot it under with the rail. Then he pinched it up, welded it in place, and it seemed like it worked pretty well. So I might lean towards the same type of approach as far as that's concerned. So anyway, as a result of adding rails to the build, I have to do something with the rear torque boxes. So the rear torque boxes, I've seen guys where they'll cut the rail, and they'll butt it against the torque box, and they'll cut a little piece off the rail and put it on the behind side of the torque box. I don't see what the point of that is, because you just discontinued it. Now the welds are generally going to be your stiffest portion of the area, but I would just rather have the rail go all the way through and have the torque box tie into the rail, because the rails are pretty thick material. It just makes the most sense to me. So I will have to cut the torque boxes. The only thing I will say is the bottom pan of the torque box, the little cover you see on the very bottom of the car, that one is going to be under the rail, so I don't have to cut that. I just need to cut this little piece that goes side to side in there. I'll have to trim that for it to slide through, and the bracket that's behind it, which is pretty beefy. So that's the only one that I'm a little bit hesitant on cutting, because that thing's 1/8 inch thick or better. So I'm throwing ideas around there. But I am probably going to put a cargo strap on the car, pull the car in, because I think it's moved like 1/8 of an inch at the back. It's kind of, kind of bowed out a little bit. So I'm gonna have to correct that a little bit, pull it a little bit, get that set, and then, get everything measured, put in there, and then weld it while it's in that position. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm going with some of that. The other variable that I haven't considered yet in this, or I have to figure out how I'm gonna do this, is I really want to have wider tires in the back, a little bit at least, more than factory. I plan on rolling the edge on the new, when I get the new stuff in there, new panels in, but the it's extra room and it keeps it from cutting into the tire if you got to re-get bottomed out somehow. So I could buy tubbed wheel wells. They sell them. They're $450, $500, whatever it is. But I had already bought the factory ones that were like the standard factory replacements. So what I'm contemplating at this point, I don't know exactly if I'm going to do it yet, is splitting the wheel well inside, like where the two halves come together and they seam weld all the way over there. There's little roll, it's like a roller welder basically. Come inboard of that slightly, half an inch or something, and then slitting it and then scooching the inside over 1.5 inches, and then welding it stripping in between the two. I think it's the easiest approach. It just takes some time. You just have to make sure it stays in alignment. I don't think it's anything rocket science doing that. And I think I can do that. The only thing is then I have to move the panel, the brace that's at the back seat. I'm going to have to shift that one in because it holds that contour of the wheel well, so I have to move it in the same amount. And then obviously where the trunk door, the trunk lid ties in down there, I have to move that as well. But it would give me a little more option as far as tires are concerned. I don't want to cut the frame rail, because it's a hat also. I mean, it has a flange and then it goes down and comes around, right? So I don't mind trimming the flange and maybe beefing it up somehow and scooching it over, but I don't want to move the main thing. I've seen guys where they'll actually notch the frame and then they'll turn one portion and put a connecting piece in there. I don't want to go that far with it because I plan on putting some of the Mike Mayer panhard or some other stuff in there, and it actually requires, it's aligned with where the rail is, so I'd like it to be in a factory location ideally, if I'm going to put that on the panhard and all that stuff. So, but anyway, that's just a thought at this point.
Okay, so I need to give a quick update from what I was saying earlier about the inner rocker panels. So these inners that have to go in here, what I was thinking at the time was that I was going to notch out the torque boxes to run them all the way through, and I think that's not the case anymore. I'm going to notch the lid, but not the torque box, because when I look at what's actually in here, so if you have an inner rocker and it comes on its way to the back, it's going to come, obviously it's going to hit into this, so you would need to come in here and cut and pocket this out, right? Well, so this here is rough, it's pretty much the same thickness as the inner rocker, so it's kind of a wash as far as which one's worth more as far as the strength of it. But I'm looking at the basic design. So if you're coming back with the inner rocker that's mounted flush to the front, comes all the way to the back, this bracket that's inside the new frame rail, this guy right here, is thick. It's 1/8 inch thick steel, and it comes and it bends over and runs down the inside of the front panel there. So this guy here, it wraps around under there. This is also one of the main pieces that has where your coil, where your leaf spring ties in under here, because this is where your nut or your bolt or whatever nut be out here outside. One of them, can't remember if it goes bolt from the inside or outside. But anyway, going through this hole right here, right? So this heavy one comes over and actually turns and comes down the rocker. So it comes and runs around here. So really, if I cut that out, I'm losing the rigidity that I have here that I don't really need to lose, because the more I look at it, the inner rocker, if it comes back and goes from here and say it continues all the way to the back, what am I gaining out of the back portion? Yes, I get a little tie-in of this guy, but I'm already going to get a tie-in if I come to this face, and the part that's from here back does nothing. You're beefing up this for what? I mean, it doesn't really, I'm not achieving anything by having that in there, I guess is my point, because there's nothing applying a load on this back area in here. there's no twisting because all your twisting is going to come through your frame rail. So as your frame rail comes down and makes that, you know, little Z step or whatever you want to call it there, joggle over, as far as the strength of it, that back is just a extra little chunk of meat that just supports the bottom side of the, or the inside of the rocker panel, which again doesn't do anything because all it is tied into the wheel well where there's no load applied. The only place you might theoretically have a issue was this bracket in here for the window. You know, if you were cranking on that, yes, it would, you know, theoretically apply a load in that area, but again, it's in line with this, so it's not going to do anything. So there's really just, there's no gain to having that piece back there. So I am just going to chop it off from what it looks like and just weld it up against here. Now I will have the flange that goes in behind this guy and ties in. So I will have to make sure that that I cut that, that I do that right, because what I don't want is to push this over by inserting a flange in between here, have this thing get shifted, and then that knock my holes out of alignment, or my front spring, you know, perches, or whatever you call them, this front spring bolts. If I knock that mounting point to the left by even another, you know, 70 thousandths or whatever that material is in thickness, that's, you know, it's not right. It's not technically, you know, the geometry won't be right, especially depending on what my tram shows. If my tram is showing that I have my, whatever it is, 37 and 3/8 or whatever across the front, then I don't want to move it, right? I would, if I wanted to do anything, it would be trim it off and have the other piece be there. But I think it's kind of a wash. I could probably trim one or the other and just have it, you know, just do a little good bead across there, and it probably won't matter. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there because what I was looking at, and this is where it gets kind of interesting, is I've got this dimension. This kind of looks funny with this piece of, you know, PVC in here or whatever, but all it is a notched piece of PVC that's cut to the length that was from inside here to inside the other rocker. And so putting the cargo strap on here, I can get back to my 58 and 5/8 dimension, which goes from the outside of this lip here to the outside of the lip on the opposite side. So it started to splay out slightly by like 1/8 or something of an inch. So I put the cargo strap on to bring it back in. But when I do that, it tightens up my gaps down in here. So, which is, you know, expected, but it's going to tighten this gap up. Now you can tell it's bigger here than it is here, but it's tight up in here. Where my concern is the heavy bracket, the real thick one. Try if I can get an angle in there. It's got air. You know, there's an air gap there. So something needs to be between this piece and the inner rocker. So, and that's the same on both sides. I've got a gap over there too. So I'll have to look at that. I can't rebend this thing, not realistically. So what I'm probably going to do is take a piece of, you know, 1/8 inch or something material and just sandwich it in between there. Maybe I'll put a plate that covers this whole area here. So it'll be 6 inches long or whatever, and, you know, 4.5 tall, or whatever, however tall that rocker area is. 5 inches or something. So I'll just put a plate in there, weld everything there. That way I can kind of beef up that back pan or back plate area without actually changing any geometry on the other thing. But yeah, I don't really understand why they would have this guy here come out further than this guy, because now they can't possibly be welding to the same piece of material. So I'm assuming there must have been some sort of shim in there. I just don't remember one being there when I removed that. So it's just odd to me you'd have that big of a gap unless it's just made wrong. So, but again, like down here, you can see the gap there. Well, that's an easy one. I can easily put that strip, the bottom flange of the rocker can slide right down in there, and that'll fill that gap nicely. This side again is a little bit off. So again, I got to check my dimensions, make sure I didn't, you know, shift anything. But, you know, did the whole thing shift to the past driver side? I don't know. I'll take a look and remeasure. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there that, you know, the inner rocker, you know, this portion back here where there's these parts that are all bent funny anyway from the factory, and where they, you know, you really jack this stuff up. I don't know that I need any of this. I could probably just chop this thing off wherever it is and weld it straight up into that panel. And then I can put some L brackets or something in there and weld them in just to give it a nice gusset effect, so to speak, or beef it up, you know, strap it a little bit. And I still have to fix some of this down here on this end. But just throwing it out there, I don't know that it does any real benefit to go beyond the torque box. I do think it helps getting in and tying into that vertical panel, not relying on just the cheesy cover to do the tie-in for you. I think that's a little bit stupid if you did that, but, or I won't say stupid, but it's just probably not as stiff as it could be. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there, in case anyone's thinking about it. But yeah, that bracket that's at the back there is very thick, so there's no point in cutting that, because that's some really good, strong material that doesn't really make sense to remove. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, so a quick update here. There are some problems with the way the rear torque boxes were built. they're not aligning real well with the body in terms of, you know, squaring up. And so what I'm getting at is, if you look at the bottom panel there, that one has a pretty healthy gap. At the back, I mean, it's well over a 1/4 inch. The front is a lot closer, probably 3/32 or, you know, maybe not an 1/8 inch, but a little less than that. But while that's got a gap, if you go to the top, it's touching right here because this one has a lip from, you know, this, say 3 inches, 3.5 inches here. There's a lip bent over towards the back that goes back into, you know, behind there to tie into the rocker. And so it's touching in the top portion, but not in the bottom by, you know, a healthy margin there, right? So so that's the first issue. The second issue is on the other side of the vehicle. I've got a pretty decent gap overall here. I mean, that's a weldable gap. I can live with that. But the bottom it's hitting, you know, it's making contact down in here, but then it gradually works its way away from it to where you have 3/16 gap or so down there on this end down here. So so I was doing some measurements, and something that's interesting is like this corner of the frame rail. This end here, I was naturally thinking these were going to be, I mean, I know the outside technically doesn't matter when it comes to dimensions, but this is pretty impressively off at that point. So if I look at this guy, you'll notice that this piece coming across comes over and is not in line with this. And so this guy, if you actually measure across here, the distance from this corner to the alignment hole underneath the bottom, under basically right, yeah, see, I guess it's like right here underneath the bottom. If you measure this distance here, it's a 1/4 inch longer than the one is on the other side. And this one, as you can tell, it's very much in line with that plate. So it seems like this one's correct. That one, in addition to being bent, because it's bowed up, in addition to being bent, it's also too long. So you really you could never use that for a measurement point, obviously, but it's just interesting, you know, that these things are a very funky shape, so there's not a whole lot of things to measure off of when you're trying to square this up. So what I ended up doing was taking this piece of angle iron, cutting it to 35 and I want to say about a 1/16 under, so yeah, so basically 35 and 9/16. And that's because the measurement from the hole, or from the locating hole to the other locating hole, is supposed to be 37 and 5/8. So because of the way this is rolled, it's not quite the same, correct, but the locator hole to the edge of this face is 1 inch from the center of the hole to the face. So it seems to be the easiest way to kind of lock it in, because as I'm moving stuff around, it's kind of bowing in and out, and I can't clamp it to the wall, to the rockers, because the rockers, apparently it's not a good flush fit, right? So that's not allowing me any good clamping place. So what I'm probably going to end up doing here is welding this piece in, just, you know, spot it in 3 spots on each end, just to hold that orientation, to keep the width, you know, locked in at my 37 and 5/8. And then once that's locked in, then come over here and slit this one. So along this dotted line, just take the die grinder and just slit that. You know, I'll probably have to come past where this dotted line goes to. I'll come out to like here probably, but slit that one and then allow this to squeeze in a little bit and then re-weld it. That'll correct the distance from here and the gap here versus the gap here. So that'll align that a little bit, and it still allows the top to kind of remain where it is, because I think once this moves down here, this thing will flush up a little better when I crank it on the body with the cargo strap. And then on this side, I'm going to end up basically taking running a grinder down down here, slitting this down to probably honestly within 1/2 an inch or 3/4 of an inch from the end, and allowing this with its L bend on the back to move inboard. So once I move that inboard, I think I can get that gap to be similar to the gap that's over here, and therefore everything would then butt against the rocker at the same time. I can't go crazy with it, but if you look at the big bracket behind it, it's also gapped. So I don't know that it's supposed to be gapped or that it's not supposed to be gapped, but I just know I can't weld that against a wall when it's not touching the wall by that big of a distance. You wouldn't want to try to bridge that. So I think I can get some of that in. I might have to shim a little bit here and there with some plates or whatever, like I was saying the other day, but it's, it's kind of crazy that these things are, this badly put together that they're not even really square. And I can't guarantee the body's square, but I can't see why the body would be tweaked out in that kind of a twisted orientation on both sides. That just seems like it's a little too much to be expecting there, I guess. But and then otherwise, I marked all these holes this morning, so I've got all the holes marked where I'm going to transfer them over. I don't want to take off and start stripping the paint off those until I get this all figured out, though, just so I can put it back in the same spot, and obviously all the marks will line back up. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at with this. But yeah, it's interesting that these torque boxes are that crooked, basically. So I'm not really sure what to do about it. I had contemplated on this side actually pulling these removing these spot welds down here all the way into, kind of leaving that one in the corner maybe, and then swinging this panel, kind of just prying this panel inboard slightly to correct that gap. But I don't really want to do that because this gap over here looks decent and it looks similar to the other side. So I think it's just that the flange is bent incorrectly. So that's kind of where I'm sitting with that, I guess. So anyway, that's just something I wanted to highlight on there.